Oh, the light's a bit bright. Morning all. Thanks for the opportunity to present some thoughts that I've compiled from not just my own ideas but the rest of the uranium team at CSA. We've got quite a diverse range of experience at CSA, including a substantial amount of experience in the Kazakhstan sandstone hosted systems with some of our Russian geos that work with us now. Okay, jumping straight into it. This talk is not about the uranium price, and it's not about reactors or nuclear power or why all those things are good things. It's going to be a talk about geology and exploration, and why I think that's still a good idea despite some of the doom and gloom surrounding the industry. You're probably all familiar with graphs like this, showing how the exploration spend in uranium is very closely tied to the price. But the main reason I wanted to put it up was just to show that the three big booms that we've had in uranium exploration since the World War II. Another way of looking at it is looking at how Australia's uranium endowment has evolved over time. So this graph is just plotting up most of the significant uranium deposits in Australia, and just the size of the deposit against when they were discovered. So the first thing to note is that it was a bit of early success, right back straight after World War II, Rum Jungle and up in northwest Queensland, Mary Kathleen and Westmoreland, places like that. But what really jumps out is this spectacular increase around the early 70s up in the East Alligator area, where there's just a huge number of deposits were found in a very short space of time. I haven't plotted Olympic Dam on this graph because, as you're all probably well aware, putting that on there just blows the graph right out of the water, but that was in the mid-70s as well. Things kept ticking along reasonably well. There wasn't a lot of major success, and really the last deposit found in that second boom was Kintyre, which was really in the dying gasp of that phase before the uranium price had a bit of a collapse, and we had a long spell before the boom kicked off again in 2005 or so, when it developed a few small deposits were found, but really those I was scratching to find a lot that had been found in that last little boom. 4 Mile is obviously the biggest one you could claim in there, but Theseus and Thunderball, you're progressively getting smaller and smaller, and the last little one was the Skevy prospect, really. No deposit there yet, found up near Mount Isa by Regal Point. Just delving in a little bit more deeply into the history, how were things done in the different phases. That first boom was really, I described it as crude but effective. It was very much driven by government incentives. The US and UK governments were keen to get resources, so that flowed through to Australia. We were pretty much well at the start of the learning curve on what we were doing with searching for these things. It was really a prospecting style of thing. I really like the donkey-mounted scintillometer. I think that's a great way of exploring. It was much reliant on the early airborne surveys, radiometric surveys, albeit pretty primitive in compared to the way we do things now. It was very much driving how they worked, and it found the near surface and outcropping deposits, and they focused around the historical fields. I mean, Rum Jungle was found, back in the 1890s, the torbanite. That's a crystal of torbanite from Rum Jungle up in the corner there. I don't think they realised it was uranium back when they first had the rum party, but that area was certainly a major focus in that early work. The next phase, the big phase, when the price really went up, I call that the golden age of uranium exploration. That was very much driven, I guess, by the oil shocks when OPEC decided to turn off the taps, and a lot of countries decided to introduce nuclear power programs. And again, very much driven by airborne radiometrics, albeit increasing sophistication and quality, but still not as sophisticated as today. It's when I actually joined the uranium search myself back in the 80s, kicking around Barradale Roadhouse up near Onslow looking for unconformity uranium, and it was just a whole series of airborne surveys. There was a fixed-wing survey to start off with, then a helicopter survey to pin down those anomalies, then ground surveys to find out whether we'd actually located the anomalies, because we didn't have GPS back in those days, so there was a lot of radiometrics before we finally got around to drilling some holes. But this period of exploration was really successful, as exemplified that East Alligator success on the last chart. And most of Australia's known deposits were found during this phase. 85 odd deposits have been located. After the hiatus in the early 80s, we had this surge again led by an increase in uranium prices. I think they kicked up to, $140 a pound or something at one stage there, and there was probably nearly 140 companies listed on the ASX to chase that. This phase saw a lot more airborne EM and other geophysical tools brought in. But there was a significant recycling of old prospects and known projects. There was a few small successes, things like Warrior in South Australia, but it's nothing that you get particularly excited about in hindsight. And the prospecting approach was still working. Things were still sticking out of the ground. Thunderball and Skevy being examples of that you can still walk around the bush and find uranium. It was quite extraordinary, actually. But increasingly, mineral systems and a lot more science was beginning to be applied to the search for uranium. Big focus on paleo channels, particularly in South Australia, but elsewhere. And there was the success of places like 4 Mile, Uranium South Australia's Samphire project was quite interesting. But one out of the box was the Theseus discovery that Toro made, which was a really nice example of some good science finding something completely new. So where did that leave us? You've probably all seen this chart or similar ones. This is from Geoscience Australia, just showing where all the deposits are at the moment. We've got the 3 operating mines at Olympic Dam, 4 Mile and Ranger. A whole slew of pre-development projects here in WA. Going through various permitting phases at the moment. A number of other projects that are sitting on the books, but not a lot to be said about the eastern states, I must confess. Given the current political situation on that half of the country, it's a bit of a waste of breath talking about uranium, quite frankly, so we'll move on. I put this slide up because it's really complicated, and I'm not expecting you to digest it. The point is that because of the chemistry of uranium, all the oxidation states it has, you can get lots of different geological processes that form a plethora of different deposit types. The Red Book categories of deposits goes over 2 pages when you list out all the categories and subcategories. But what are the deposits? The sort of deposits which are actually interesting? What are the ones that we should be looking for? One way of looking at it is to have a look at where all the production's coming from today. So it's a bit of a busy chart, but the point I'm trying to make here is that all the ones highlighted in yellow are sandstone-hosted deposits. There's a couple of green ones, which are the unconformity-related ones, the Canadian high-grade deposits. And there's a few flyers in there as well, a few odd ones, Olympic Dam and Rossing, probably unique deposits, and Langheinrich, which is a calcrete. So I take from that sandstone's something that's pretty interesting to have a look at. The ones coloured in black are highlighted because they're in situ recovery, which I think is a really important component in what sort of deposit you want to have a look for. Here's a cartoon that I cribbed out of a recent paper describing all the different sorts of deposits you can get. But out of all that range of things, I think what's the best deposit? Well, obviously the ones that you can make the most money from. But what are those? I think clearly the sandstone-hosted deposits are something that needs most of our attention. Clearly the high-grade unconformity-associated deposits are very attractive targets. And sometimes I think these calcrete deposits can be of interest if you can find one that's good enough. There's a lot of low-grade ones out there, but there's a few that are well worth chasing, particularly if you can get on top of the metallurgy. So what's missing in Australia? Roger Skirrow and his colleagues at GA did some good work in the uranium space a while ago, and they did a survey of what's going on, and there's giant deposits of a couple of different types which just don't seem to be present in Australia. The main one are big sandstone-hosted deposits, like those you've got in Kazakhstan. We don't seem to have any magmatic deposits of any significance like Rossing, and the big volcanic-hosted systems, like those in Siberia, also seem to be lacking in Australia. We do have some of the ingredients for these things, and there's some examples. You know, Ben Lomond and Maureen are in that volcanic neck of the woods, but they're tiny compared to the, 300,000 tonnes of uranium in Stretsovskaya. I have trouble pronouncing that one. So, sandstone-hosted deposits are really significant producers, and we've got the ingredients for those in Australia. Rossing and Stretsovskaya and Olympic Dam are unique, and it's probably not worth as much effort chasing those sorts of things. It'd be nice if you stumbled over one, but I think we've had a pretty good look at all the outcropping areas of Australia, and there's none of those lurking around near surface. Just a reminder of why these Kazakh-style systems are so interesting. They're big. They're really big. They're tens of kilometres long, these roll fronts. They're really large, 12,000 to 64,000 tonnes of contained uranium. They're classic roll fronts. They're mostly exploited by in-situ recovery. They started out being some underground mines. They were found serendipitously. It was a fluke that they stumbled across them. But the setting that they're in, sedimentary basins on the flanks of mountains, is a setting that's quite common globally. But whilst we've got sandstone-hosted deposits in Australia, we don't have giant ones like Kazakhstan or Niger, perhaps. So, having decided that this is a sort of deposit that's worth targeting, how do you actually go about finding them? Well, I think we've got to do things a little bit differently to the way we've done it in the past, and we've got to be a bit cleverer about it. The mineral systems approach that the industry's been working on for the last decade or so is probably the key to getting you in the right neighbourhood. It's the targeting approach that'll direct where you're going to go and search for these things. And it will also give you clues on how to explore for them. And if you couple that with new exploration technologies that are being developed at the moment, I think that's going to provide a means of progressing exploration for these sorts of things. Look, a quick review of what the mineral systems approach is. I don't want to go into a lot of technical detail about it, but essentially it's a way of thinking about deposits. Where's the metal come from? How does it get to the deposit? What makes it into a deposit? And lastly, and quite importantly, what preserves that deposit so you can actually find it. That general sort of concept has been customised by groups like Geoscience Australia, CET. I know a number of companies are doing the same sort of thing. So you take that general principles of mineral systems analysis and you can apply it to uranium and come up with some specific sorts of things to go and explore for. You can summarise it in some cartoons. I mean, it's quite, there's, as my earlier diagram showed, there's a lot of factors that go into the creation of a uranium deposit, but this is a cartoon that GA put together just summarising some of the ingredients and pathways that produce sandstone-hosted deposits. So how do you turn that targeting from a mineral systems approach into a discovery? Well, we're getting more and better tools to focus in our area selection. Seismic's getting much cheaper and much more effective. There's a lot of research being done in better processing, and it's not the big cost petroleum approach that it has been in the past. Both active and passive seismic, which is even cheaper, give you a lot of information about what's going on undercover. They give you a lot of information about structure, stratigraphy, where sandstones are likely to be, where the impermeable shales are. It's a really valuable technique, and I can see it being used a lot more in future. It can be coupled with other geophysical techniques like gravity and passive EM systems, which again are building up that picture, geological picture of the subsurface. EM, airborne EM, is a really important tool for building the picture here. It's not something that it can directly detect mineralisation, but the reason for using it now is a regional mapping tool. It tells you how thick the cover is, it tells you about the conductivity of the rocks that you want to target. And redox, the oxidation state of the rocks, is really important for understanding uranium deposits, and especially for the sandstone-hosted ones, which are directly controlled by the change from a reducing environment to an oxidising environment. I reckon we need to have a bit of a think about revisiting gas geochemistry. Radon searches, it's been a bit of a scattergun in the approach. It can be a bit of a loose technique. The gas can leak up all sorts of cracks, but it's a really helpful way, I think, of prioritising and ranking targets. You've got to build a whole series of information, and this is quite an important ingredient in doing it, I think. And there's a whole heap of software tools we've got to help us deal with all this new geophysics that can be collected. That's all got us into the right sort of neighbourhood, but how do you actually find the deposit? Well, I think you've got to sharpen the focus by collecting more data, and one way of doing that is coiled tube rigs. There's the Deep Exploration Technology, CRC, is doing a lot of research at the moment on better drilling technologies. Coiled tube rigs are a very common technology in the petroleum space. This is a rig that's for sale in America if you want to go and buy it. It's very fast, it's very cost effective, and what DET are trying to do is work out how to get that working effectively and cheaply in a minerals context rather than a purely petroleum one. But the outcome here is that you get a lot more metres, a lot faster. Coiled tube rigs are really fast. They drill hundreds and hundreds of metres a day, and you get a lot of data out of it. And finding new uranium deposits is going to be contingent on having enough data to work out where to go with these things. The holes that you drill with the rigs can be used for a whole series of new wireline tools that have been developed. Tools like the NMR tool, which gives you information about a whole range of hydrogeological factors, permeability, porosity, specific yield. They're all really important pieces of information, particularly in an in-situ recovery perspective. Once you've got the hole and the sample from the coiled tube rig, you can do a whole heap of geochemistry to build up your story. You can do hydrogeochemistry, including the radon again in the water, but looking at a whole series of elements. The 60 element mass spec approach gives you a lot of information about pathfinder elements, alteration, lithochemistry, all building blocks in telling you where to go to find the uranium deposit. And we've got another outcome with the DET is technology like the lab at the rig, that white trailer, enables you to have the answers as you're drilling the holes. You don't have to wait for weeks for the lab to give you the answers. You get the feedback there and then, and that can control where you're going to go and drill the next hole. And you can also use spectral mineralogy tools, which tell you about the minerals, the clays, the micas, the different rock-forming components. Again, all these components in saying, here's what's going on with the rocks, this is which way you go to find the uranium deposit. And lastly, you can put all these things together with the increasingly sophisticated 3D modelling tools we've got. It doesn't matter whether it's Leapfrog or GoCAD or Micromine or whatever it is, putting all the different ingredients, not just uranium, but rock properties, permeabilities, all these things together in a 3D model is really important for sharpening the focus and working out where to find the deposit. So, in conclusion, I guess my point is that Australia is still a really good destination for looking for uranium. There's substantial potential for the discovery of new resources. We've got an absolute abundance of relevant, high quality, pre-competitive data in Australia. It's an advantage a lot of countries don't have. GA and others have done a lot of really good work on targeting. Unfortunately, industry take-up's been a bit limited because they finished that work just as the market tanked. But that knowledge is there, and it's up to us to apply it now. And that work showed that Australia's got all the right sort of ingredients to have new uranium deposits, particularly giant sandstone-hosted deposits. There's numerous permissive tracts of land that haven't been adequately tested for this yet. I've drawn some circles here about some of the areas that I think are the obvious places to go and look for these Kazakh-style systems. People are already doing this sort of work. The Canning Basin's certainly getting a look in at the moment. And some of these other areas are equally interesting to go and have a look for these sorts of deposits. All these targets are going to take some time and commitment to find the deposits, but time is quite an important ingredient in the exploration story. We saw in the last boom that there was a whole heap of short-termism driven by ASX-listed juniors who were chasing the next announcement for the next quarterly. Didn't actually generate a lot of discovery whatsoever. I think we actually need the luxury of a bit more time to think these things through and to do it properly. But the reason for doing that is we're not trying to find more uranium as such, we're trying to find better deposits that we can make more money out of. And the sandstone deposits that you exploit using in situ recovery, I think, are likely to be the ones that are going to get you over the line. The production costs are going to be low enough for you to actually make money out of it. So that's my take on the uranium in Australia. Thank you.